Welcome Year 11 to the night before news for business studies, which you will be sitting on Monday the 17th of November in the afternoon. On the slide you'll see a front cover. The front cover will be very similar to the one that you will see on Monday, except it will have a different date on it. Now the reason I've put this on is because I want you to take note of the length of the exam, which is 105 minutes, along with the marks. That's 90 marks available. So if we do a very simple calculation of 105 divided by 90 marks, it works out to be about 1.17 minutes per mark, which equates to about 1 minute 10 seconds. We can go down as far as and say it's just the 1 minute per mark, because you don't have to worry about that 10 second, because it is an average and some questions will take longer than others. For those with extra time, you just add on 25%. So you should be working on about 1.45 minutes per mark, which is about 1 minute 27 seconds. Again, we don't have to be completely accurate because some questions are going to take longer than others. But for the longer mark questions, you're looking at about 1.5 minutes a mark. Again, just the emphasis that it's an average, as some would take longer, some wouldn't. Alongside the front cover and the exam booklet, you will get a case study. It's called a source booklet, and inside of those source booklets, you will in fact have 2 case studies. Now, when you get this booklet, it's important for you to notice 2 things. Firstly, you have to look at what case each section belongs to. So the first case will usually be for section B of the paper. The second case will usually be section C. But furthermore, it also tells you the question that it applies to. So in this particular paper, the paper that was sat in May 2023, questions 4, 5 and 6 were to do with section B. Questions 7 was to do with extract B. Okay, I'm going to go through some of the questions and how you should go about answering them. So the first type of question we've got is a multiple choice question. And although this sounds easy, because they're the simplest method to answer, there are some common mistakes that people make. Students sometimes just tick a box or circle the answer. Don't, because they're marked. These multiple choice questions are marked by a computer and therefore will not be read by the computer if it's a tick or a circle. That way you'll get 0 marks even if you do get the correct answer. The correct way to do it is just put a cross in the answer. If you make a mistake, then you'll need to just put a line through it so the computer doesn't read it, and then put your correct answer. For example, let's take a look at question 1. You read the question and you decide that the answer is A. So you put a cross in A. Having checked your work, you decide that actually it's wrong and it is C. What you would need to do is put a line through the A and then mark C. That way the computer won't read A and it will read C instead. All questions are knowledge based and therefore AO1 and don't need any application. Be aware though how many crosses or answers you have to select, because if you select more than you are supposed to, you will not get the marks. So for example, we can see in these questions, there are questions 1 and 3 are based on answering 1 or selecting 1 answer. Question 2 are selecting 2 answers. It also then tells you further down which ones, how many to select. If you cross more than the question states, you will get no marks, even if you have put a cross in the right answers. Along with the multiple choice questions that are worth 1 mark, there are extra questions that are called short answer questions. And the command words you can see are in that table there. They're define, give, state, and identify. There are four, but there are some subtle differences. If we take the define and give, these are theoretical knowledge key terms, and they're the ones that should be in your do now booklets that we've been doing all year. They could be one word answers, but generally probably need a definition. So it'd be no more than one sentence. If the question says state and identify, they're context-based questions. So you will have a piece of information to look at, and your answer needs to come from that evidence. Let me show you what I mean. There's a short answer question, define business plan. Now, all you've got to do for define business plan is give the definition. However, on this one, as well as this one where it says give one aspect of the business plan, you need to know all the aspects, and any one of those will be a mark. If you contrast that to the second type of 1 mark question, you will get a bit of information. So, using the information in table 3, identify this time the best year for Loco to save any retained profit it may have. Well, we know what interest rates are. Interest rates are when you earn money on money that you've got saved in the bank. So you want the interest rate to be high. Therefore, the answer should be 2014. Again, just writing the answer will give you the marks. This question here, it says identify the total number of sales that Neil and Sue will need to break even. Now you need knowledge of break even. As you can see, the 200 units, the answer is 200 units, because if we go to the break even point where the two lines cross and come down and follow it down, it goes to the number of sales, which is 200 units. Again, all you need to do is write 200 units and you will get the mark. The third type of question are 2 mark questions, and these are questions that we've done loads of in class, and they're usually to do with outlining. But with this case, you have to apply it to the case study, which you can see on the left-hand side as Loco. So we know the theory that the advantages or how business plan helps businesses are those bullet points there. Now, what you need to do is pick one of those and relate it to the case study. Now, when you relate it to the case study, you must make sure you are quoting from the case. So there's the mark scheme. The second and third paragraphs here are your model answers. And if we can see where the mark scheme is picking up the case study and using words from the case study to make sure that you are applying your knowledge. So when you're using outline, it's only 2 sentences, but you do need to make sure, if there's a case study, to be showing words from the case study and how they fit into your argument. Now, the third type of question is 3-mark questions. Now, these 3-mark questions are important because from now on, all these answers require a BLT. Again, in class, we've done a lot of work on BLT, the 3 connectives, because, leading to, and therefore. Most of these questions are explained and don't come with any case study. However, in the stem of the question, there may be a type of business that you need to refer to, and that's where your context comes in and your application of knowledge. So, explain one reason why an entrepreneur would produce a business plan. So, we know that the reasons why we produce a business plan. Now, we have to use those, but make it relevant to an entrepreneur. So here's a model answer. An entrepreneur would need to produce a business plan to get finance. This is because the entrepreneur may need a loan from a bank. This will lead to the bank needing important information to judge whether the loan can be repaid. This information will therefore tell the bank whether the loan can be issued. So we've got the theory there. So we know that a business plan is able to raise finance. So that's the one I've used in the answer. If we now follow it, we can see the BLT. So with those three connectives and the theory, relating it to the entrepreneur, it would get me the 3 marks. Here's another question, but this time this question has got a little bit more context because it refers to small business, but it also talks about a manufacturing business, which again we know to be a company that makes products. In this case, there's a third part to the question where it says high quality products. There's my answer. One disadvantage of producing high quality products is that it may be more expensive. This is because the raw materials may be high. This will lead to the business having to charge a higher price, resulting in the loss of some customers. Now, this time I've changed the T in the BLT to resulting in. It means the same thing, and you won't be penalised for that in the exam. But having the 3 connectives shows 2 logical points, plus your theory gives you 3 marks. On to 6-mark questions. Again, the 6-mark questions follow the same structure as a 3-mark question and using the BLT or the 3 connective process. When we discuss, and the 2 command words are discuss and analyze. When we discuss, you won't have a context, so there's no need to apply any of your knowledge. But if it says analyze, then there will be a context, there will be a case study that you will need to build your answers into, you're leading to therefore. That gives you direct quotes in order for you to get the full 6 marks. Okay, let's look at a typical 6-mark question. So the question here is discuss how proximity to market could influence the location of a small business. Now you will notice that there's no case study. However, you do need to understand the question in order to answer to the question. So the important part is proximity to market. Now you should know, or through your revision, you will know that proximity to market means being close to customers. It is this that has to be in your answer. So your answer should reflect being close to customers. Here's an example answer. Proximity can directly influence the location because a business would need to be close to raw materials. This means that shipping costs could decrease. Therefore, there will be an increase in profit as expenses will decrease. Now, technically, this answer is theoretically correct because it's a reason why business is located in that certain area. However, it has nothing to do with the proximity to the market, i.e. how close they are to customers. Therefore, the examiner gave this 0 marks. This was a past answer from a past student. So in order to get the full 6 marks, here is a 6-mark answer. Now you will notice that the answer is more to do with the proximity to market. So if we look at the answer a bit more closely, first of all, we see the BLT, the connectives. Okay, so they're all there, and you will notice that there are 2 paragraphs, 6 connectives. So we've done a BLT twice. So as a 6-mark answer, it's exactly the same as a 3-mark answer, which most of you have mastered, and therefore you're just writing 2 paragraphs. So if we look from the top, the small business may want to be as close to the market as possible. This is because it would increase convenience and awareness about the business for customers. This could lead to an established brand name with a reliable customer base. In this way, it is more likely to grow into a successful business. Therefore, a small business is likely to choose a location closest to its target market. Thus how proximity to market would influence the location of the small business. That paragraph is good because it keeps referring back to the question, and therefore justifies why close to the market as possible because of convenience would be a good thing. The second paragraph is pretty much the same, but for a different reason. So when faced with a 6-mark question, just look at it as 2 3-mark answers and put them together. The theory is what you would have got through your revision. Now let's look at a answer that has a context. So this time the question is, analyze the impact of an entrepreneur of being a Little Movers franchisee. The obvious important word here is franchisee. So it's the person buying the franchise, not the person selling the franchise. So this is nothing to do with Little Movers, but the people who would buy the franchise. Notice the wording, the command word as well. It's changed from discuss to analyze. But again, you're looking at 2 3-mark paragraphs about the same thing. And in this case, it's about being a franchisee and the advantages of being that. So if we look again at the answer, we firstly see the quotes from the case study. By showing the quotes in the case study, you are immediately applying your knowledge. However, we also can look at where the connectives are. Your BLTs are there. So given all of that, what you have there is a full 6-mark question with 2 sets of BLTs or 2 sets of connectives, but also actual words from the case study to make sure that you are getting the full marks and application marks. If we move on to the 9-mark questions, the 9-mark questions again are exactly the same, but this time you're writing 3-mark explain questions using the same format. The because leading to therefore, you'll do it 3 times, of which 1 paragraph should be your conclusion. So here's a typical question with an answer. The question is, justify which one of these 2 options you would go for. Now, 9-mark questions always have 2 sides of the argument. It's either should a business do A or should a business do B. So in this case, last course patisserie is talking about investing in new machinery or employing more staff. Now, with this type of question, you don't need to argue both sides of the case. Because the question is a justify question, you just have to look at one side and say, these are the reasons why. So, for a 9-mark question, you're looking at paragraph 1, which is a BLT, the advantage of the option that you have chosen, remembering that you cannot be wrong. You can get both. One student could write about option 1, still get 9 marks. Another student get option 2 and still get 9 marks. So you can't be wrong. This is about how well you justify. So in paragraph 1, you write your BLT and it's the advantage of the option. And as we can see on the model, that's the first paragraph explaining why they should employ more staff. And there's reasons in there which are related to the case study as well. But again, you can see that there's more than one connective or more than 3 connectives, which is quite a lot for a paragraph like this, which doesn't lose any marks. The answer doesn't lose any marks, and it's good practice to put in as many lines of argument as possible. Now, for the second option, for paragraph 2, it's not about justifying the other option because that's not justification. So you're not looking at the advantages of the other option. What you're looking at is the disadvantage that bringing more staff would cause the business. So Again, that's the justification behind it because you are evaluating that answer. So you're justifying by evaluating it. Again, because we've used the answer's got so many connectives beforehand, it doesn't have as many in this paragraph. You only need to look at 5 connectives for a 9-mark question. The conclusion is where it changes. Again, you still need a BLT. However, as you can see from here, the it depends rule is really important because you're trying to make a justification and it's not always going to be right, but you need to say when it's right and when it's wrong. So in this case, it says it depends if the increase in productivity generates enough extra revenue. So what the candidate is saying, yes, employing staff is good because there's quality issues involved and they're handmade, but it will increase their costs because they have to pay a salary. So given that, I think they should still go for employing more staff, but it does depend if it does increase the productivity or not. So you're weighing up the argument and the answer in order to get the 9 marks. So we move on to the final questions, which are 12-mark questions. And these are certainly evaluation mark questions. This extended answer will only appear in section C, and there's only one of them to do. Again, you shouldn't feel intimidated by the 12 marks because you are only looking at writing the same format because leading to, therefore, you'll need an introduction, 2 of those BLT paragraphs, and a conclusion. So the question is at the top. Evaluate the impact of e-commerce on Aphrodite's marketing mix. Again, you pick the option that you think's best. So it might be that it's had a good impact. Therefore, you write that your essay will be on how e-commerce has been positive for Aphrodite's marketing mix. So there's an introduction. Now, in the introduction, you will define the key term and answer the question. The key term in this is e-commerce and marketing mix. Therefore, if you evaluate that, then if you define those questions, those key terms, that shows knowledge. And then say it's had a positive or negative effect on it. Again, you can't be wrong. If you think it's a positive effect, that's great. If you think it's negative, also great. Just justify your answer with that. So in the paragraph 1, you'll be using a BLT to agree with your answer. So yes, it has been effective because, or no, it's not been effective because. Again, writing your BLT, using your connectives, using your analysis, using your strands of argument will get you the marks there. Paragraph 2 changes from the 9 marker because this time, because the question says evaluate, you have to contradict your answer. So it'll be the opposite of what you've said in paragraph 1. So if you've said that in paragraph 1 that e-commerce is a good thing, positive effect on the marketing mix, paragraph 2 will be why it's not a positive impact on the marketing mix, and vice versa. Now, in your conclusion, there are 3 things that you have to do. You have to answer the question. So you have to make a decision and say, I definitely think it has a positive impact, or I definitely think it's a negative impact. But then you justify it. Now, you justify it with new arguments, not into the great depth of a BLT like your first 2 paragraphs, so for paragraph 2 and 3, but it has to be something new. Otherwise, you're just repeating yourself. Again, use the it depends rule. So it did have an impact, but it would depend on, and then you go on to explain that as well. And that will give you your 12 marks. Okay? So they're the different types of question. I hope this has been useful. I'm sure you're all doing lots of revision, and I look forward to seeing you after your exam on Monday to tell me how fabulously it went.